When I caught myself thinking clearly again, it was beneath the tall black cross swaying with the pines. The wind played through the leaves like whispers, ruffling her long black hair. We dressed her in a white gown, its starkness matching her pallid skin. Flowers crowned her head, thorns biting into her flesh. Blood trailed from her brow, dripping into her wide, sky-blue eyes. Red ran from the crown into her dress, and she didn't mind. She was drunk on wine, and on God. She didn't flinch when the nails pierced her wrists and feet. She hung there, suspended like the branches of the pines, and as her bloody tears fell, some hit my upturned face. They burned like acid, or perhaps like the truth. The words of my old pastor echoed in my mind, a sermon about the cross, the ultimate humiliation, the ultimate irony. God clothed in suffering, elevating human wretchedness to divine glory. But, looking up at her twisted, agonized form, I thought she looked nothing like God. The night before, they took us out onto the lake. We were half-starved, reduced to beans and butter for weeks, but out on the dock a feast awaited. Pizza, bread, wine, and fries. Everything was cold, yet we devoured it like a divine banquet. They let us eat without sermons or prayers. Laughter rang over the water, mingling with the gentle sway of the waves. Some of us fell asleep there, full and rocked into peace for the first time in weeks. When the program director stood, his voice broke the spell. He began recounting the Last Supper, painting it in his own warped way. Before Christ's death, he said, God fully dwelt in him. Through the consumption of his flesh and blood, Christ was prepared for the glory of crucifixion. It wasn't accurate, but we were too numb to question. His words seeped into us like the wine we'd been given. He challenged us, asking who had the faith to let God fully dwell in them. The dark-haired girl rose first, her face alight with conviction. The feast transformed into a celebration. They gave her more wine and we danced beneath the stars. The night hummed with song and laughter until they led her to the dock's edge. A chain hung there, disappearing into the lake. Pull it up, the director instructed, and she obeyed, her small hands straining against the weight. What's down there? Someone asked. A dove sent from God, he said with a smile. An angel. We thought he was joking until the chain rose, dragging with it a mass of writhing black tendrils, thick and muscular like a man's arm. The lake churned as it emerged, a squirming void of something alive. The director dipped a cup into the mass, drawing up a viscous black ichor. He sliced a piece of its flesh, placed it on a plate, and offered it to her. She ate, washing it down with the ichor, and then she danced. Her movements were unsettling, erratic, primal. She whispered insults between her teeth and laughed as though possessed. Fear prickled at my spine, but she seemed to revel in it. Back on shore, the director pulled me aside. His arm around my shoulders felt like a shackle. How are you really? He asked. I lied. I'm good, grateful to be here. Missing home? A little. He nodded, his gaze distant. This is home for me, he said. His sincerity almost eroded my defenses until he asked again, Do you value truth? Of course, I replied, even when it's scary. I hesitated but nodded. What if I told you the true God isn't the one in the Bible? What we've experienced out here, these miracles, this is the true God. I forced a smile. That makes sense. He smiled back, satisfied. That's what makes a true believer. Most people get bogged down in scripture, but this is real faith. Later in bed, I searched for comfort in an old notebook they hadn't confiscated. It held notes from my Bible studies, fragments of truth I'd clung to. The last verse I'd written down was from Luke. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. The synchronicity felt like a whisper from God, a reminder of his will. I realized then what we were going to do to her. By morning she hung from the cross, her body lifeless yet impossibly animated. The thing we'd dragged from the lake writhed at her feet, black tendrils stretching toward her like supplicants. She wept and wailed, a sound not human yet achingly familiar. Her tears fell like rain, red and unrelenting. They struck my face, hot and heavy, each drop a silent accusation. The director stood beside me, his voice low and reverent. Do you see now? This is truth. This is glory. I looked up at her, the girl we'd sacrificed in the name of a false god. She hung there, a grotesque imitation of the divine. And in that moment I knew we had not touched heaven, we had unleashed hell.